Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So today Obama is talking to the Republicans of the GOP House caucus, and Congressman Pence didn't talk about nuclear reactors. He says, we want across-the-board tax relief, across the board. What he means by across the board is the same percentage for everybody. And that percentage, let's say a nice 5% tax cut for everybody, for the poor schmo earning $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, working stiff, that's going to be a few bucks. For the super rich plutocrat oligarch, that's going to be in the millions. Across the board in percentage terms is a recipe for tax cuts for the rich and the failed trickle-down economics long embraced by the Austrian school and the reactionary Republicans. So instead of that, if you wanted to do that, you say, let's give the same amount of tax relief. And the way you do that is by increasing the personal exemptions and the standard deduction. That is across-the-board tax relief, because everybody but everybody is dealing with those personal exemptions and the standard deduction, whatever it is, single, married, filing jointly, head of household, whatever you are. Increase those, and you will be protecting income starting at the lowest levels, and there the result will be progressive in the sense that you'll be giving the most tax relief to the people who need it most, and you'll be giving the same amount to everybody. So it's fair, but of course that those extra $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is for the super rich fat cat at the top is not going to seem enough. You say, I spend that on lunch every day, whereas for the working family this can be survival. So typical Republican demagogy, across-the-board tax cuts. I remember the Republicans back in 2001 when we came in with the Bush tax cuts for the rich bill. They called it a jobs bill. Remember that? That was called the Job Creation Act. It wasn't called the Tax Cuts for the Rich Act, the Job Creation Act. Well, where did that money go? The argument was if you give the rich more money, it will trickle down because they'll invest and create jobs. Well, they didn't. Surprise, surprise. They put it all into derivatives and runaway shops, sweatshops in the third world. So who are you kidding, Congressman Pence? Talk about nuclear reactors. Again, the problem for the Republicans is if they want to get anywhere, they've got to come on as the party of large-scale industry, the party of heavy industry. And again, Charlie Wilson, the GM guy who was the head of the Pentagon under Eisenhower, said, what's good for General Motors is good for the nation. Now, that I don't agree with. But that's a whole lot better than what's good for Goldman Sachs is good for the nation, because at least with the General Motors part, there are some jobs involved, there are some actual areas of real physical production. So Obama tells these characters, first of all, he says, there's not that much difference between us. You're right, Obama. There's not a dime's worth of difference, despite all the efforts of Limbaugh and Hannity and O'Reilly to cook up the idea that there's an extreme difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. There's not a dime's worth of difference. Two vultures eyeing each other over the corpse of Medicare, much as Hitler and Stalin once eyed each other over the prostrate body of Poland in 1939. The kind of compromise Obama seems to be going for is to say, listen, Republicans, you hate Medicare. I want $500 billion of cuts to Medicare. Why don't you support my $500 billion of cuts to Medicare, and we'll attempt to balance the budget on the backs of the poor. Now, I had meant to regale you with some quotations from Obama, the Postmodern Coup, the making of a Manchurian Candidate. We're approaching the second anniversary of when that appeared, and indeed the essays in it began appearing in January, February of 2008, 2 years ago. Obama, the Postmodern Coup, we'll get to it in future broadcasts. By the way, if you want to buy any of my books, go to tarpley.net, and you will find the links to where they can be found. And that includes all the books, including all the translations, French, Italian, German, Japanese, Spanish, and so forth. I'm happy to announce a modern Greek edition of Obama, the Postmodern Coup, and Surviving the Cataclysm is going to be coming out. Obama says there's not a dime's worth of difference. And then Obama says, we thought the unemployment would be lower, but even in the first months of last year, the counting of the unemployment, the unemployment was so great that the counts were actually slowed up, and they didn't come in on time. So Obama says, I listened to a consensus of those who are supposed to know the economy best. Whoa, Obama, you listen to a consensus of those who know the economy best? And who are those? Larry Summers, who presided over the destruction of 1/3 of the Harvard endowment because of his insistence on putting it into toxic derivatives of the most speculative type. By the way, the average U.S. college endowment has now lost 20%. I think it's actually 19%, but let's call it a good round 20. 19 to 20% of the average college endowment in the United States wiped out in 2009, the worst since 1932. And now, all those academic economists work for those colleges. So what it means is the academic economists had better be renamed quackademic economists because they have struck out. Show me the one that predicted it in the way that I did with my landmark prophetic Surviving the Cataclysm, your guide to the worst financial crisis in human history. It came out in 1999 at the beginning of a crisis decade, which then saw the dot-com bubble, the housing bubble, and then finally the crisis of the Anglo-American banking system, the world derivatives crisis of 2008. And, of course, as we go through this AIG stuff, in the middle of that is a $3 trillion derivatives issue from a undercapitalized hedge fund in London operating under a regulatory regime which was just a joke. It was just not there. So here's what we need to do. Grab a hold of this nuclear reactor stuff. Grab a hold of the offshore drilling, because that makes sense as an emergency measure. Drill, baby, drill. Absolutely. Drill wherever there's oil. Get it. Obvious environmental controls. We don't want pollution against human beings. But the global warming hoax has collapsed. The global warming hoax is on its last legs. It's a matter of laughter. It's a matter of scornful laughter in the U.S. Congress when you build up. Obama brings up the overwhelming scientific evidence for anthropogenic global warming. Bunk. That's simply garbage. That cannot be. Nobody can say this anymore with a straight face. It's a fraud initiated by Al Gore and his Al Gore, of course, protege of the genocidal British royal family with Prince Charles, his close friend, and, of course, Prince Philip, who wants to come back as a deadly virus to kill people and solve the problem of overpopulation in the world. That's the age-old attitude of the reactionary oligarch, this time dressed up. And remember, that anthropogenic global warming means in practice that China and India won't get oil. You look at the U.S. Diplomatic activities in the Indian Ocean, in the Gulf, in Africa, all across South Asia. What's the goal? Prevent China from getting oil. Then you bring in the global warming thesis, which says what? China and India should not get oil. They should not be able to increase the world carbon output. So the global warming thesis is an imperialist weapon. The weapon of imperialist genocide just as sure as a tank or a plane or a predator drone or a bayonet. It is an intellectual weapon wielded by these thugs. So that's all gone. What we're left with is nuclear reactors. Build them or collapse as a civilization. Drill, baby, drill. Yes, by all means. Drill, baby, drill. Get that $30 billion as a jobs program and put it into those two. And high-speed rail. Start building high-speed rail. Between nuclear drilling and high-speed rail, start it with $30 billion. Start them. That won't get you too far. But once it gets going, people would see that that's a real recovery because the multiplier effect of those expenditures is far greater than putting it into Starbucks, McDonald's, and retail sales. So you can see all of this at Tarpley.net right at the top. Emergency program, Stop the Depression. That is the authoritative source on what to do economically. And we'll see you next week. And remember, it's Tarpley.net.